My Uncle Derek walked into our living room like he owned it. That's how Derek moved through the world, entitled, dismissive, certain. He spotted Emma's violin resting on the piano bench. The same violin my father had given her 3 months before he died. Derek picked it up without asking, turned it over in his hands like he was inspecting produce at a farmer's market, and laughed. A real laugh, the kind that's meant to be heard. This cheap thing. He held it by the neck, careless. Sarah, seriously. Sell it and buy her a real instrument. This is embarrassing. Emma's face went still. She was sitting at the kitchen table, practicing her sight reading. 9 years old, and already she could tell when an adult was being cruel. Derek pulled out his wallet. I'll give you $200 for it right now. Save you the trouble of listing it online. She doesn't want to sell it, I said. My voice was calm. I'd learned calm over the years. Come on. 200 is generous for this. He set it down too hard. She'll thank you when she's playing something that doesn't sound like a dying cat. I didn't argue. I never argued with Derek. Instead, I smiled and said something that would change everything between us. Let me get it appraised first. He laughed again. Sure. Waste your money on an appraisal. You'll see. 3 days later, when Marcus Chin walked through that same door, the professional appraiser I'd called from the most reputable firm in the state, Derek happened to be visiting again. Coincidence? Or maybe my sister Vanessa had mentioned I was making a big deal over nothing and Derek wanted to see me proven wrong in person. Marcus opened his case. He put on his glasses. He examined the violin under specialized light for 40 minutes while Derek smirked from the couch. When Marcus finally looked up and said the number, Derek's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the armrest, then sank to the floor. $94,000. Before I explain how my father's cheap violin became the catalyst for exposing my family's assumptions about my entire life, let me say this. If stories like this one are why you're here, subscribing helps me keep sharing them. It means more than you know. Now, let me take you back to where this really started. Emma was born the same year my mother told me I'd made my choice by marrying Nathan. Nathan was a high school music teacher. Good man. Patient. The kind of father who'd spend 3 hours helping Emma build a cardboard castle and never once check his phone. But to my mother, to Derek, to my whole family, he was proof I'd settled. Proof I lacked ambition. Proof I'd never be anything remarkable. My father disagreed, but quietly. That was his way. He'd spent 38 years as a violinist with the Philharmonic, not first chair, not famous, but skilled. Deeply skilled. He collected instruments the way some people collect art. When Emma showed interest in music at age 5, he started teaching her himself. Patient, like Nathan. He'd guide her small fingers on the bow, never forcing, always encouraging. The violin he gave her wasn't random. I knew that the day he handed it to her, 3 months before the stroke that killed him. He'd presented it in its case, worn leather, brass latches that clicked with authority. Emma had opened it like she was unwrapping something sacred. This was made by a student of Giuseppe Guarneri, my father told her. It's been waiting for the right person. He didn't say it was valuable. He didn't say much at all about its history. My father had always been modest about his collection. I knew he had instruments in storage, pieces he'd acquired over decades, but he never displayed wealth. Never mentioned what things cost. The family assumed his teacher's salary meant he'd lived modestly and died modestly. They had no idea what he'd actually built. The first time Derek dismissed me openly, I was 23. Fresh out of college with a degree in arts administration. I'd landed a junior position at a gallery downtown, nothing glamorous, but it was a start. Derek had just made partner at his law firm. He showed up to Thanksgiving in a car that cost more than most people's houses and spent dinner talking about his caseload, his billable hours, his future. When my mother asked what I was doing, I mentioned the gallery. Derek cut me off. That's nice, Sarah. A little hobby job while you figure out what you actually want to do. It's not a hobby, I said. It's a career. He smiled. The same smile he'd use years later when dismissing Emma's violin. Sure. Until you have kids and need real income. I didn't tell him I'd already been approached by the gallery owner about a managerial track. I didn't tell him I'd spent the previous 6 months building relationships with collectors who had more money than Derek would see in his lifetime. I just smiled back and changed the subject. That became the pattern. Derek would dismiss. I would smile. And I would go back to work building something he couldn't see. By the time I was 28, I was managing acquisitions for 3 galleries. By 30, I'd started consulting independently for private collectors. By 32, I'd facilitated the sale of a Rothko that netted me a commission larger than Derek's annual salary. He had no idea. Neither did my mother, who still asked when I was going to find something stable. The second incident happened when Emma was 4. My mother was babysitting while Nathan and I attended an estate sale, professional, not personal. A collector had died, and his family was liquidating everything. I'd been hired to assess and broker several pieces. I came home to find my mother reorganizing our kitchen cabinets. "You know," she said, not looking at me, "Vanessa just bought a house in Asherton Heights. 4 bedrooms. Derek helped with the down payment." Asherton Heights. The neighborhood where people measured their worth in square footage and their children's achievements in Ivy League acceptances. "That's wonderful for Vanessa," I said. "I'm just saying, if you and Nathan need help getting into something better than this rental." "We're fine, Mom." She turned to face me. "Are you?" "Because Emma's going to need stability. Good schools. You can't give her that on a teacher's salary and your gallery work." I just closed a deal worth $340,000. I was standing in my rental kitchen, we rented by choice, not necessity, being told I couldn't provide for my daughter. I didn't correct her. Instead, I called my financial advisor that evening and moved more money into Emma's education fund. It already had $65,000 in it. I added another 20. The third incident was smaller but sharper. Emma was 7. She'd started showing real talent on the violin, not prodigy level, but dedicated. My father had been working with her twice a week. After one of their lessons, Derek stopped by. He watched Emma practice for maybe 30 seconds before turning to me. "You know actual violin lessons cost money, right? Like, from a real teacher." "Dad's been playing for 40 years, I said. Derek snorted. "In a public orchestra. That's like saying someone's a professional athlete because they coach Little League." My father was in the other room. He heard it. I saw his shoulders tighten, but he didn't respond. He just kept cleaning his own violin, the one he'd played in hundreds of performances, the one that had fed his family for nearly 4 decades. I walked Derek to the door. "Emma loves learning from her grandfather. That's what matters. If you say so. Just don't be surprised when she's behind the kids who actually invest in their education." I closed the door and went back to the living room. My father was putting his violin away. He looked tired. "He doesn't know anything," I said. My father smiled. "People see what they expect to see." That phrase stayed with me. People see what they expect to see. Derek expected me to be struggling. My mother expected me to need help. Vanessa expected me to be jealous of her house in Asherton Heights. So that's what they saw, regardless of reality. What they didn't see, the network I'd built over 10 years. The collectors who called me first when they wanted to buy or sell. The private viewings I arranged. The commissions that had let me pay off Nathan's student loans in full, build Emma's education fund to over $100,000, and purchase a small commercial property downtown that we leased to a coffee shop. We still lived in the rental. We still drove practical cars. Nathan still taught high school. I still worked from home most days, taking calls and answering emails in yoga pants while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. The family saw what they expected, someone barely getting by. They had no idea I'd been strategic about every single thing. After my father died, everything shifted. The funeral was large, colleagues from the orchestra, students he'd taught, friends from 50 years of music. Derek gave a speech about how our father had lived simply but fully. My mother nodded along, dabbing her eyes. The will reading was small. Just immediate family. My father's attorney, Patricia Moreno, sat at the head of the conference table with 3 sealed envelopes. "Your father was very specific about his wishes," Patricia said. She was mid-50s, sharp in the way that made me trust her immediately. He updated this will 4 months ago. My mother frowned. For months? He didn't mention that. Patricia opened the first envelope. To my wife, Margaret, I leave the house and all its contents, along with my retirement accounts and life insurance policy. Standard. Expected. My mother nodded. To my daughter Vanessa, I leave my collection of vinyl records and my 1967 Mustang, fully restored. Vanessa actually smiled. The Mustang was worth maybe $40,000. The records were sentimental. Patricia paused before opening the third envelope. To my daughter Sarah, I leave all musical instruments in my possession, both in the house and in storage unit 447 at Secure Space downtown, along with all documentation of their provenance and value. I felt my chest tighten. Storage unit. He'd never mentioned a storage unit. Derek leaned back. So Sarah gets some old violins. That's sweet. Patricia looked at him. The instruments are itemized in an attached document. Your father had them professionally appraised 6 months ago. She slid a paper across the table. I picked it up. Started reading. Stopped breathing. 18 instruments. Violins, violas, 2 cellos. Makers I recognized from art history classes, from auction catalogs, from museum collections. Guarneri. Stradivari. Amati. Bergonzi. Dates ranging from 1679 to 1834. Total appraised value, $4.7 million. The room went silent. My mother grabbed the paper. This can't be right. He was a teacher. Where would he get? Your husband was a skilled investor and a patient collector, Patricia said. He acquired most of these pieces over 40 years, often before their makers became highly valued. He maintained them meticulously and documented everything. Derek's face had gone red. Dad had $5 million in violins and drove a 15-year-old Camry? He valued music over material display, Patricia said simply. Vanessa looked at me. Actually looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. Did you know? No. That was true. I'd known my father collected. I hadn't known the scope. My mother's voice shook. Sarah can't possibly manage this. She doesn't know anything about. Actually, Patricia interrupted, your daughter has extensive experience in art acquisition and estate sales. Your husband mentioned she was the only one qualified to handle the collection properly. I felt something crack open in my chest. My father had known. He'd known what I did, what I'd built, even though I'd never told him the full extent. He'd seen me. The meeting ended badly. Derek stood up so fast his chair tipped over. This is insane. She doesn't need $5 million. Mom should get. The will is ironclad, Patricia said. I drafted it myself. I took the paper with me. Drove home in silence. Nathan was waiting with Emma. I showed him the document, and he sat down hard on the couch. Sarah. Oh my God. Emma looked up from her book. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, sweetie. I kissed her head. Grandpa left us something special. That night, after Emma went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the itemized list. 18 instruments. $4.7 million. And the violin my father had given Emma wasn't on the list. That's when I realized he'd given her that one separately. Before the will. It was hers completely, not part of the estate. Which meant he'd wanted her to have it regardless of what happened with the rest. I called Patricia the next morning. The violin he gave Emma, I said. It's not listed. No. He gave that to her as a gift 3 months before he passed. Separate from the estate. Do you know what it's worth? Pause. He had it appraised separately. He didn't want that value included in the estate total. Patricia. You should have it independently assessed. But based on the documentation he showed me, somewhere between $75,000 and $110,000, depending on market conditions. I sat down. My father had given my 9-year-old daughter a violin worth 6 figures and told no one. He knew Derek would react badly to the will, Patricia said. He wanted Emma to have something that was completely hers. No estate complications. No family arguments. Just a gift from grandfather to granddaughter. I thought about Derek's laugh. This cheap thing. $200. Thank you, Patricia. Sarah? Your father talked about you often. He was very proud. I had to hang up before I cried. The next 2 months were careful. I contacted specialists, visited the storage unit with Patricia present, documented everything. The instruments were pristine. My father had maintained them perfectly, kept them in climate-controlled storage, preserved every certificate of authenticity. I didn't tell the family. Not the full scope. My mother knew about the will, obviously, but I kept the details vague. I'm working with specialists to assess everything properly. That was true. It just wasn't complete. Derek called twice. Mom's worried you're going to sell everything and waste the money. I'm not going to waste anything. She thinks you should put it in a trust. For Emma's future. I can help set that up. I have an estate attorney, Derek. But thank you. The second time he called, his tone shifted. Look, I'm not trying to control you. I just think Dad would want the family to benefit. Not just you. Dad was clear about his wishes. Dad wasn't thinking straight at the end. He was sick. He updated his will 4 months before the stroke. He was completely competent. Derek's voice hardened. We'll see. He didn't contest the will. Patricia had drafted it too well. But the family dynamic changed. My mother stopped calling. Vanessa's texts became curt. Derek showed up unannounced twice, both times when Nathan was at work, both times asking questions about the instruments. Have you sold any yet? I'm taking my time. Dad would want you to be smart about this. Not emotional. I smiled. Didn't engage. Didn't correct him. What Derek didn't know, I'd already been contacted by 4 major auction houses and 7 private collectors. What my mother didn't know, I'd placed 3 of the instruments on temporary loan to a museum, which both preserved them and created tax advantages. What Vanessa didn't know, I'd set up a foundation in my father's name that would fund music education programs in underserved schools. I kept working from home. Kept living in the rental. Kept letting them see what they expected. Emma kept playing her violin. Every evening, she'd practice in the living room. Sometimes I'd sit and listen, watching her small hands move across the strings, thinking about my father's patience, his quiet strategy, his understanding that value isn't always visible. She was getting better. Noticeably better. Her teacher, a real teacher now, someone Nathan had found through the school district, said Emma had remarkable potential. Derek stopped by one afternoon in mid-March. Emma was practicing. He listened for maybe 45 seconds before shaking his head. You really should upgrade her instrument. She's going to outgrow that thing. I looked at him. He was serious. It's fine for now, I said. Sarah, come on. I know money's tight, but there are payment plans. You can't let her talent go to waste because you're too proud to accept help. There it was. The assumption. The certainty that I needed help, that I was struggling, that my pride was the only thing preventing me from accepting his superior wisdom. I could have told him then. Could have explained that Emma's cheap thing was worth more than his car. Could have mentioned the $4.7 million in instruments sitting in climate-controlled storage. Could have detailed the foundation, the museum loans, the network of collectors who called me first because I'd spent 15 years building a reputation he didn't know existed. Instead, I said, I appreciate you looking out for her. He left satisfied, certain he'd offered help to his struggling sister. That's when I started planning. Not revenge. That's not what this was. But I was tired. Tired of the assumptions, the dismissals, the casual cruelty disguised as concern. And I realized my father had given me something beyond the instruments. He'd given me proof. Proof that I knew value when I saw it. Proof that I could be trusted with important things. Proof that the family's assumptions about me had been wrong for 15 years. I called Patricia. If someone were to make an insulting offer for Emma's violin, and I wanted to demonstrate its actual value, what would you recommend? She was quiet for a moment. An independent appraisal from a certified professional. Someone with credentials the family couldn't dismiss. Do you know someone? I know exactly who to call. Marcus Chin ran the most respected instrument appraisal firm in the state. He'd testified in court cases. He'd authenticated pieces for the Smithsonian. When Patricia mentioned his name, I recognized it from articles I'd read in trade publications. He's expensive, Patricia warned. I'm not worried about the cost. We scheduled the appraisal for a Thursday afternoon. I didn't tell Derek it was happening, but I did mention to Vanessa casually that I was having Emma's violin looked at by a professional. Why? Vanessa asked. Derek suggested she needs an upgrade. I want to know what this one's worth first. Vanessa must have told Derek. Because on Thursday afternoon, 40 minutes before Marcus was scheduled to arrive, Derek showed up with coffee and his concerned brother face. I heard you're getting an appraisal. That's smart. Really? I'm glad you're being practical about this. Emma was at school. Nathan was teaching. It was just Derek and me. Once you have a number, Derek continued, we can talk about what kind of instrument to get her. Something that'll actually last. Sure, I said. Marcus arrived exactly on time. He was mid-40s, professional, carrying a case that looked more expensive than most instruments. Derek watched him set up with barely concealed amusement. This is Marcus Chin, I said. He's going to assess the violin. Derek nodded. Good to meet you, Marcus. I'm Sarah's brother. Just here for moral support. Marcus didn't respond. He was already examining the instrument. For 40 minutes, Derek sat on the couch, checking his phone, occasionally glancing up with that smirk. The same smirk he'd worn when he offered me $200. The same smirk he'd had at the gallery when I was 23, at Thanksgiving when Emma was 4, at my father's funeral when he talked about simple living. Marcus used specialized lights. He examined the wood grain, the varnish, the scroll. He took measurements. He photographed the label inside through the F-holes. Finally, he looked up, set down his loop, made a note in his tablet. Well, Derek said. What's the damage? 300? 4. Marcus looked at me, not Derek. MS. Torres, this instrument is a 1743 Giuseppe Guarneri del Gassou, made during his golden period. The varnish is original. The condition is exceptional. Based on comparable sales and current market conditions, I'd estimate its value between $90,000 and $105,000. For insurance purposes, I'd recommend you insure it for $94,000. The room went silent. Derek's face changed. The smirk disappeared. Color drained. He looked from Marcus to me to the violin. That's, you're saying. His voice actually shook. 94,000? Yes, sir. For that? For this exceptional example of 18th century Italian lutherie, yes. Derek stood up. Sat back down. His knees actually buckled. He grabbed the armrest and sort of slid to the floor, landing hard on his knees. Jesus Christ, Sarah. Why didn't you tell me? I looked down at him. My brother. Who'd offered me $200? Who'd called it a cheap thing? Who'd suggested my daughter sell it and buy something real? You didn't ask, I said. Marcus was still kneeling when Nathan came home with Emma. She walked in with her backpack, saw her uncle on the floor, and stopped. Uncle Derek? Are you okay? He looked up at her. His face had gone from red to gray. That violin. The one Grandpa gave you. It's worth $94,000. Emma looked at me. I nodded. She set her backpack down carefully. I know. Grandpa told me it was special. Derek's head snapped toward her. He told you. He said it had been waiting for the right person. She walked over to where Marcus had set the violin back in its case. He said I had to take care of it. That it was important. My 9-year-old daughter had known. My father had trusted her with the truth, and she'd kept it safe without ever mentioning the value. She'd understood, somehow, that the worth wasn't the point. Derek pulled himself up using the armrest. His hands were shaking. Sarah, I didn't know. Obviously, I didn't know. I never would have. Offered me $200 for it? He flinched. I was trying to help. You were trying to prove I didn't know what I had. I looked at Marcus. Thank you for coming. I'll expect your written report within the week. Absolutely, Ms. Torres. I'll include comparable sales and detailed provenance documentation. He packed his equipment with the efficiency of someone who'd witnessed family drama before and knew when to exit. The insurance company will need photographs as well. I'll send those separately. After Marcus left, Derek stood in my living room like he wasn't sure whether to leave or stay. Nathan had taken Emma to the kitchen for a snack, giving us space. Mom's going to want to know about this. Derek's voice had shifted. Less confident. She should probably update her estate planning. If Emma has something this valuable, Mom has no claim to Emma's violin. Dad gave it to her as a gift. Separate from the estate. Something changed in his expression. The estate. Right. The instruments Dad left you. He sat down heavily. How many of those are worth? Derek, go home. I'm just asking. Go home. He left. But I knew he'd tell my mother. I knew she'd call Vanessa. I knew that by morning, the entire family would be recalculating everything they thought they knew about my father's estate and my ability to manage it. I was right. My mother called at 7:45 the next morning. Sarah, Derek told me about Emma's violin. Good morning, Mom. Don't good morning me. Why didn't you tell us it was worth that much? I didn't know until yesterday. That's why I had it appraised. Silence. Then, your father gave that to her 3 months before he died. Did he tell you what it was worth? No. He just said it was special. He knew. Her voice was tight. He knew exactly what he was giving her, and he didn't tell anyone. Not even me. I poured coffee. Waited. Sarah, we need to talk about the other instruments. The ones in storage. What about them? Derek thinks you should have them professionally managed. Someone who specializes in high-value assets. I am someone who specializes in high-value assets, Mom. I've been doing this for 15 years. She made a noise. Not quite a laugh. You sell paintings for galleries. That's not the same as managing a multi-million-dollar collection of rare instruments. I took a breath. Let it out. I'm handling it, Mom. Are you? Because Derek says you're still living in that rental. Still working from home in your yoga pants. If you have access to this kind of money, why are you living like? Like what? Another pause. Like you're barely getting by. I'm not barely getting by. I've never been barely getting by. You've just assumed I was. Well, you certainly haven't demonstrated otherwise. If you had money, you'd live differently. You'd have a proper office. You'd dress. I hung up. Nathan looked up from his coffee. That went well. She thinks I'm irresponsible because I don't perform wealth the way Derek does. You could tell her. About the consulting work. The commissions. The property downtown. I could. But she wouldn't believe me, or she'd find a reason it didn't count. I sat down at the table. My father understood that. That's why he left the instruments to me without explanation. He knew they'd question it regardless of what he said. Emma came downstairs, already dressed for school. She'd put her violin back in its case the night before, carefully, with the same attention my father had taught her. Now it sat by the piano, looking exactly the same as it had 3 days ago when Derek had laughed at it. Everything looked the same. Nothing was the same. My mother called Vanessa. Vanessa called me on Saturday morning. Mom's upset. I know. She thinks you're being secretive about the instruments. Derek told her you won't let anyone see the appraisal documents. There are no appraisal documents yet. I'm still working with specialists to assess everything properly. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Sarah, I know we're not close. I know I haven't exactly been supportive over the years. But I need to ask you something directly. Okay. Are you actually qualified to handle this? Dad's collection is worth millions. If you make a mistake, I won't make a mistake. But if you do, if you sell something for less than it's worth, or if you don't preserve them properly, or if... Vanessa, I manage acquisitions and sales for private collectors who own pieces worth more than Dad's entire estate. I've facilitated transactions in the 7-figure range. I know what I'm doing. She made a sound. Surprise? Disbelief? You've never mentioned that. You've never asked what I actually do. You've asked if I'm still doing the gallery thing, which isn't the same question. I thought. She stopped. We all thought you were just working part-time. Selling a few paintings here and there while Nathan supported the family. Nathan and I both work. We both contribute. He teaches because he loves teaching, not because we need the income. Then why do you live in a rental? Why don't you have a nice car? Why do you? Because we chose to. Because we like our neighborhood. Because we're not interested in performing wealth for family members who wouldn't notice our actual lives either way. That landed. I could hear it in her breathing. Mom wants to have a family meeting, Vanessa said finally. About Dad's estate. About how the instruments should be managed. Dad's will was clear. The instruments are mine to manage. But if the family has concerns. The family had 40 years to have concerns about Dad's collecting. None of you cared when you thought it was just a teacher's hobby. Now that there's value attached, suddenly everyone has opinions. That's not fair. Isn't it? I kept my voice level. When was the last time you asked me about my work? Not to criticize. Not to suggest I should do something else. Just to ask what I actually do. Silence. I'll come to a family meeting, I said. If Mom wants to schedule one. But I'm not changing how I'm handling the estate, and I'm not interested in defending my qualifications to people who've spent 15 years assuming I don't have any. I hung up before she could respond. Nathan found me sitting at the kitchen table an hour later. They're really pushing this. They're scared. Derek's scared he missed something. Mom's scared she didn't know Dad as well as she thought. Vanessa's scared I'm going to screw up and somehow that'll reflect badly on the family. Are you going to tell them? Everything you've actually built? I thought about that. About the satisfaction of watching their faces change. About Derek's knees buckling. About my mother's voice going quiet when she realized how wrong she'd been. Maybe. If it becomes necessary. When would it become necessary? I looked at him. When they push hard enough that staying quiet becomes harder than speaking up. That moment came faster than I expected. My mother scheduled the family meeting for the following Sunday. 2 p.m. at her house. Derek, Vanessa, Nathan, and me. Emma was invited to her friend's birthday party, convenient timing that I suspected wasn't coincidental. My mother wanted this conversation to happen without children present. I spent the week preparing. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I was tired. Tired of performing humility I didn't feel. Tired of letting them see me as less than when I'd built something significant. Tired of honoring my father's quiet approach when it meant letting his family disrespect both of us. I called Patricia Moreno on Tuesday. I might need documentation of the estate at that family meeting on Sunday. Her voice sharpened. Are they contesting the will? Not officially. But they're questioning whether I'm qualified to manage the collection. Your father chose you specifically because of your qualifications. That's documented in his letters of intent. I sat up straighter. There are letters? 3 of them. Written over the past 2 years, explaining his reasoning for every major decision in the will. He knew there might be questions. She paused. He was very thorough, Sarah. He wanted to protect you from exactly this kind of scrutiny. My throat tightened. Can you send me copies? I'll have them couriered over today. And Sarah? If anyone at that meeting suggests you're not capable, these letters make it very clear that your father believed otherwise. He outlined your professional experience in detail. He was proud of you. After we hung up, I sat in my home office, the room Derek probably assumed was just a spare bedroom, and looked at the shelf where I kept the awards I'd never mentioned to anyone. Industry recognition for successful acquisitions. Letters from collectors thanking me for finding pieces that completed decades-long searches. Photographs from gallery openings where I'd stood next to museum directors and auction house executives, all of us smiling in front of paintings worth more than my childhood home. I'd kept it quiet. For 15 years, I'd let the family believe what they wanted while building something substantial. It had felt strategic. It had felt safe. Now it just felt exhausting. The letters arrived Wednesday afternoon. 3 sealed envelopes, each with my father's handwriting on the front. I opened them in order. The first was dated 2 years before his death. To whom it may concern, I am updating my will to reflect my daughter Sarah's expertise in art and antiquities acquisition. Over the past decade, she has built a successful consulting practice with private collectors and galleries throughout the region. Her knowledge of provenance, authentication, and market values exceeds that of many professionals with formal degrees in the field. I trust her completely to manage my instrument collection with the care and expertise it requires. The second, dated 18 months before his death. Sarah has facilitated the sale and acquisition of pieces valued in excess of $2 million total over her career. She has relationships with auction houses, museums, and private collectors across the country. She understands the importance of preservation, proper insurance, and strategic timing for sales. I have discussed my collection with her several times, and her insights have been invaluable. There is no one I trust more to handle these instruments after my death. The third, dated 4 months before his death. I have given my granddaughter Emma a 1743 Guarneri del Gassou as a gift, separate from my estate. I have done this for several reasons. First, Emma shows genuine talent and dedication to music. Second, I want her to have something of significant value that is completely hers, with no estate complications. Third, I want my daughter Sarah to know that I see her. I see the professional she has become. I see how hard she has worked while her family has assumed she was struggling. I see how she has let them underestimate her rather than prove herself to people who should have simply believed in her. Sarah will know what to do with this gift. She will know what to do with all of it. I trust her judgment completely. I read that last letter 3 times. Then I called Patricia back. I want to bring these to the meeting. That's your right. They're addressed to you. Will it look defensive? Like I'm trying too hard to prove myself? Her voice was gentle. Sarah, your father wrote these because he knew you'd need them. He knew his family well enough to predict this exact situation. Use them. That's what they're for. Sunday arrived with cold rain. I dressed carefully, not to impress, but because I wanted armor. Black pants, a silk blouse, professional but not showy. Nathan wore khakis and a button-down. We drove to my mother's house in our practical sedan, the one Derek had probably never noticed. They were already there when we arrived. Derek's Mercedes was in the driveway, still gleaming despite the rain. Vanessa's SUV was parked behind it. My mother opened the door before we knocked. You're late. We're exactly on time, Mom. She turned and walked toward the dining room. We followed. Derek and Vanessa sat on one side of the table. My mother took the head seat. That left Nathan and me on the other side, facing my siblings like this was a tribunal. My mother folded her hands. I've asked you all here because we need to discuss your father's estate. Specifically, the instrument collection and how it's being managed. It's being managed properly, I said. Per Dad's will. That's what we need to talk about. She glanced at Derek. He cleared his throat. Sarah, no one's questioning Dad's wishes. We just want to make sure you have the support you need to handle something this valuable. I have the support I need. I've been working with specialists for weeks. Vanessa leaned forward. What specialists? We don't even know who you're consulting with. Because it's not your business to know. The instruments were left to me. My mother's voice sharpened. We're your family, Sarah. Of course it's our business. If something happens to those instruments, if they're damaged or sold incorrectly, that's your father's legacy at stake. I'm aware of that. Derek pulled out his phone. I've been doing some research. There are firms that specialize in managing high-value collections. They handle everything: insurance, storage, authentication, sales. I found 3 that look reputable. If you want, I can reach out and... No. He blinked. I'm just offering to help. I don't need help managing the collection. I need the family to trust that Dad knew what he was doing when he left it to me. My mother shook her head. Your father was sick at the end. He wasn't thinking clearly about the financial implications. He updated the will 4 months before the stroke. His attorney confirmed he was completely competent. But Sarah, Vanessa's voice was almost pleading. You work from home. You don't have an office. You don't have professional credentials in music or instruments. How can you possibly? I have 15 years of professional credentials in art acquisition and estate sales. I've worked with pieces valued higher than Dad's entire collection. I know how to authenticate, preserve, insure, and sell valuable items. I know the market. I know the buyers. I know what I'm doing. Derek set his phone down. You've never mentioned any of this before. You've never asked. We've asked about your work plenty of times. No. You've asked if I'm still doing the gallery thing. That's not the same as asking what I actually do. My mother stood up, walked to the window. When she turned back, her face was tight. If you're so successful, why are you living in a rental? Why doesn't Emma go to private school? Why don't you have anything to show for this supposed career? Because I chose to invest differently. Because Emma's public school is excellent. Because we like our home and our neighborhood. Because I don't need to perform wealth to validate my professional success. Derek laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, Sarah. If you had real money, you'd show it. Everyone does. I opened my bag, took out the 3 letters my father had written, set them on the table. What are those? My mother stepped closer. Letters Dad wrote to document his reasoning for the will. His attorney had them. I slid the first letter toward my mother. She picked it up, started reading. Her face changed, confusion first, then something sharper. Derek took the second letter. Vanessa reached for the third. The room went completely silent for 2 full minutes while they read. My mother finished first. She set the letter down like it might burn her. He knew? About your consulting work. Yes. He never said anything. He respected my privacy. He understood why I kept it quiet. Derek was still staring at the second letter. $2 million in transactions? You've handled sales worth $2 million. More than that. Dad's number was conservative. I've facilitated over $4 million in acquisitions and sales across my career. Vanessa looked up from the third letter. Her eyes were red. He gave Emma that violin because he wanted you to know he saw you. He saw everything you'd built her voice cracked. While we assumed you were barely getting by. My mother sank into her chair. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think? Because you never would have believed me. Not without proof. Not without Dad validating it in writing. I looked at each of them. And honestly, because it was easier to let you underestimate me than to constantly defend my choices to people who'd already decided I'd failed. Derek's hands were shaking. The letters trembled between his fingers. I offered you $200 for a $94,000 violin. Yes. I told you to sell paintings at State Farm. You did. His voice dropped. I've been condescending to you for 15 years about a career that's more successful than mine. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. My mother pressed her palms flat on the table. The family meeting. The concerns about your qualifications. She couldn't finish the sentence. Questioning whether I'm capable of managing Dad's estate? Yes. Even though he specifically chose me because of my expertise. Even though he documented his reasoning. Even though he trusted me completely. Vanessa wiped her eyes. I'm so sorry, Sarah. We've been horrible to you. You've been dismissive. There's a difference. No. She shook her head. We've been horrible. For years. I've made assumptions about your life, your marriage, your choices. I've never once asked what you actually do or who you actually are. Derek set the letter down. His face had lost all its color. What else don't we know? I could have stopped there. Could have let the letters speak for themselves. But I was tired of holding back, tired of performing humility I didn't feel, tired of letting them see a version of me that hadn't been true in over a decade. I own the building where Cornerstone Coffee operates downtown. I bought it 6 years ago. The monthly lease income covers our mortgage 3 times over. I paid off Nathan's student loans in full 4 years ago, $68,000. Emma's college fund has $137,000 in it. I've placed 3 of Dad's instruments on loan to the Metropolitan Museum for their spring exhibition, which both preserves them and creates significant tax advantages. I've been contacted by 7 private collectors and 4 major auction houses about purchasing items from the estate. I turned them all down because I'm waiting for the right time and the right buyers. I know what I'm doing. I've always known what I'm doing. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. My mother had her hand over her mouth. Derek looked like he might be sick. Vanessa was crying openly now. Nathan reached under the table and squeezed my hand. The instruments Dad left me are currently valued at $4.7 million, I continued. I've had them professionally authenticated and appraised by the same firm the Smithsonian uses. They're insured for their full value. They're stored in a climate-controlled facility with security that exceeds museum standards. I've established a foundation in Dad's name that will use proceeds from eventual sales to fund music education in underserved schools. I've done all of this in the 3 months since Dad died while you've been questioning whether I'm capable of managing a checkbook. My mother's voice came out as a whisper. Sarah, I didn't come here to make you feel bad. I came because you called a meeting to discuss my qualifications. So I'm telling you, I'm qualified. I've been qualified. Dad knew I was qualified. The only people who didn't know were the ones who never bothered to ask. Derek pushed his chair back, stood up, sat back down. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. You just have to trust that I can handle what Dad left me. That's all I've ever needed from this family, basic trust. If you have been watching this unfold and you are not subscribed yet, I am telling you, you are going to want to be here for the next one. What happened after this moment changed everything. Vanessa stood up, walked around the table, wrapped her arms around me before I could stand. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I let her hug me. Didn't hug back at first. Then slowly I did. When she pulled away, her makeup was ruined. I've been a terrible sister. I've been so focused on my own life, my own achievements, that I never saw yours. I never even looked. I didn't make it easy to see. That's not an excuse. I should have asked. I should have cared enough to really know you. Derek was still sitting, staring at the letters. I mocked your career at Thanksgiving. Multiple Thanksgivings. I told you to get a real job. Yes, while you were making more than me. I don't know what you make, Derek. And I don't care. This isn't a competition. He looked up. Isn't it? That's what I've made it. For 15 years, I've been trying to prove I was more successful than you, better than you, and the whole time his voice broke. The whole time, you were building something real while I was just performing. My mother hadn't moved. She was still staring at the letters, at the words my father had written about the daughter she'd never really known. Mom? I said. She looked up. Her eyes were wet. He saw you. Your father saw you clearly. And I didn't. You saw what you expected to see. That's not good enough. She stood up, walked to where I sat, and did something she hadn't done in years. She knelt down beside my chair. Sarah, I have failed you as a mother. I have made assumptions about your life, your choices, your capabilities. I have offered you advice you didn't need and help you didn't want because I decided you were struggling without ever actually looking at your life. Mom, you don't have to. I do. I absolutely do. Her voice was fierce now. I compared you to Vanessa. I held up Derek as the successful one. I worried about Emma's future because I assumed you couldn't provide for her. And all of it was based on nothing. On my own prejudices about what success looks like. About who you should have married, where you should have lived, what you should have done with your degree. She took my hand. Your father knew better. He knew you were brilliant and capable and building something meaningful. He trusted you with his most precious possessions. And her voice cracked. I questioned his judgment instead of questioning my own assumptions. I pulled her up gently. It's okay, Mom. It's not okay. But I'm going to do better. I'm going to actually see you from now on. I'm going to ask real questions and listen to real answers and stop assuming I know what's best for your life. Derek cleared his throat. I need to say something too. We all turned to look at him. He stood up, walked around the table, and stopped in front of me. I've been a pompous ass. For years. I've used my career to make you feel small. I've dismissed your work, your marriage, your choices. I've offered you money you didn't need and advice you didn't ask for. I've laughed at things that mattered to you, including a $94,000 violin I tried to buy for $200. Derek, let me finish. Please. He took a breath. I did all of that because I was threatened by you. Because you made different choices than I did, and instead of respecting those choices, I needed to prove mine were better. I needed to believe you were struggling so I could feel superior. And I'm ashamed of that. Deeply ashamed. He held out his hand. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm asking for a chance to be a better brother. To actually know my sister instead of the version of her I invented to make myself feel important. I looked at his outstretched hand. At his face, which was genuinely devastated. At Vanessa, still crying. At my mother, who was watching me with something like hope. I took his hand. Okay. One chance. To be better. To actually see me. That's what I'm offering. He shook my hand like it was a lifeline. I won't waste it. I promise. Nathan stood up. I think we should probably go. This has been a lot. My mother nodded. Of course. But Sarah, before you leave. The instruments. I want you to know that I trust your judgment completely. I won't question you again. Whatever you decide to do with the collection, I know it will honor your father's legacy. Thank you, Mom. She walked us to the door. Hugged me tight before we left. I love you. I should say that more often. I love you, and I'm proud of you, and I'm sorry it took letters from your dead father to make me actually see what you've accomplished. The rain had stopped by the time we got to the car. Nathan drove in silence for the first 5 minutes, then reached over and squeezed my knee. You okay? I think so. That was intense. Yeah, you were amazing in there. Strong and clear, and you didn't let them make excuses. I leaned my head against the window. My father gave me everything I needed to stand up to them. The letters. The validation. The proof. You already had everything you needed. The letters just made them listen. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd been strong enough all along, and the only thing that had changed was my willingness to be seen. We picked up Emma from the birthday party. She climbed into the back seat with cake frosting on her face and a balloon tied to her wrist. How was Grandma's house? Interesting, I said. We talked about Grandpa and the instruments he left us. Are they still mad about my violin? I turned in my seat to look at her. They're not mad. They just didn't understand how special it was. Now they do. Good. Because I'm not selling it. Not ever. I know, sweetheart. She settled back with her balloon. Grandpa knew I'd take care of it. That's why he gave it to me. He did know that. He was very smart about people. Like you, Emma said simply. Then she went back to playing with her balloon, satisfied with her assessment of the world. The aftermath unfolded slowly over the following months. Derek called every 2 weeks, awkward at first, then gradually more natural. He asked real questions about my work. He stopped offering advice I didn't need. When Emma had a violin recital, he showed up and sat in the front row, and when she finished playing, he applauded louder than anyone. Vanessa started inviting us to family dinners at her house. Not performance dinners where everyone competed about whose life was better, but actual meals where people asked about each other's days and listened to the answers. She asked about my consulting work, about the clients I was helping, about the pieces I was sourcing. She asked like she genuinely wanted to know. My mother came over one Sunday afternoon with a box of old photographs. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Derek had once dismissed my career, and she showed me pictures of my father as a young musician, before the family, before the orchestra, when he was just a man who loved violins. He would be so proud of you, she said. Of what you've built. Of how you're handling his collection. I hope so. I know so. He told me, you know. Near the end. He said, Sarah understands what matters. She'll know what to do. I didn't fully understand what he meant then. I do now. I sold 2 of the instruments 6 months after the family meeting. A 1721 Stradivarius and a 1785 Bergonzi. The combined sale price was $2.1 million. I used the proceeds to fully fund the Music Education Foundation, to establish an endowment that would support it indefinitely, and to create a scholarship program in my father's name for young string musicians from low-income families. The remaining instruments stayed in storage. Some I'd sell eventually, when the market was right, when I found buyers who would value them properly. Some I'd keep. The 1679 Amati, I decided, would go to Emma when she turned 21. Not because she'd sell it, but because she'd understand it. She'd appreciate what it represented: legacy, patience, the quiet building of something valuable that others might not see until you're ready to show them. Derek's law firm lost a major client 3 months after our family meeting. He called me, something he never would have done before, and asked for advice. Not legal advice, professional advice about how to handle a public failure with dignity. Everyone's going to know, he said. The whole firm's talking about it. I look incompetent. You made a mistake. That doesn't make you incompetent. It makes you human. Easy for you to say. You don't fail. I fail all the time, Derek. I just don't perform my failures for an audience. He was quiet for a moment. Teach me that. How to just be, without constantly proving myself. Start by caring less about what people think and more about what's actually true. He laughed, but it was genuine. That sounds simple. It's not. But it's worth learning. I don't talk to my family every day. I don't need to. But when we do talk, it's real now. They ask about my actual life instead of the life they assumed I had. They respect my choices instead of questioning them. They trust me finally to know what I'm doing. Emma's still playing her violin. She's 12 now, and her teacher says she's ready for serious conservatory training if she wants it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, she practices every evening in our living room, the same rental living room we still occupy by choice, and I listen to her play my father's $94,000 violin and think about how value isn't always visible, how worth isn't always displayed, how sometimes the most precious things are the ones people overlook until you're ready to show them the truth. Derek never apologized again in words. But he shows up now. To Emma's recitals, to family dinners, to the small moments that matter. Last month, he asked if I'd consult on an art acquisition for a client of his. I said yes. Not because I needed the work, but because it meant he finally saw me as someone whose expertise had value. My mother has one of the old photographs from that Sunday afternoon framed in her living room now. It's my father as a young man, holding a violin, smiling at something off camera. Underneath, she's written, "He always knew what mattered." I think about that sometimes. About how my father spent 40 years quietly collecting, quietly teaching, quietly building something valuable while people assumed he was just a teacher who'd lived simply. About how he understood that real worth doesn't need performance. About how he gave me Emma's violin not just as an inheritance, but as a lesson, that the people who matter will see your value without needing proof, and the ones who don't see it probably never will, but that's okay. Because their blindness doesn't diminish what you've built. I still work from home in yoga pants. I still drive a practical car. We still live in the rental because we like our neighborhood, our coffee shop, our life exactly as it is. The difference is that now, when family visits, they see what's actually here instead of what they expected to find. And Emma still has her violin. The one my father knew she'd treasure. The one Derek thought was cheap. The one that changed everything. So, did I go too far? Or not far enough? Tell me in the comments.